Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, on Season 4, Episode 2 of The Leader's Edge, we go on a journey of learning, leading, and influencing. Imagine the varied and challenging opportunities of a shy, previously insecure woman who started this amazing journey in northern Manitoba, that's in Canada, and found herself the spokesperson for an international communication and leadership organization which is active in, get this, 145 countries around the world. Her name is Pat Johnson. She's a keynote speaker, educator, author, mentor, ontological life coach. Now, I gotta find out more about that later on. International President of Toastmasters International during the year 2010 to 2011, Regenton Advisor for the years 2020 to 2021. So it means she's still current. She's also spoken to a long list of countries around the world as a keynote speaker and educator for the last 20 years. So it's pretty much a career. She was international president and current regional advisor, as I mentioned, for Europe and the United Kingdom, and the recipient of the Outstanding Leadership and Communication Award on a global level. Pat wrote and published Building and Sustaining Vibrant and Sustainable Toastmasters Programs in Corporations. Now, I managed to say that in one breath, but do look it up because many of us help to organize new clubs and organizations, and we need to find a way that that magic formula that keeps those clubs alive. Getting yourself a copy of that book will be a step in the right direction. In 2018, this is when it was launched during the International Convention in Chicago, Illinois, USA, at the same year. Pat is also very passionate about her business, Pat Johnson and Associates, where she coaches leaders as they search for their greatest version of their authentic self. She works to help individuals overcome their self limitations and to aspire to more in life. She is an affiliate coach at Accomplishment Coaching and also has a world class speaker coach certification. She currently resides in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Pat Johnson. Pat?
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here all the way from the west coast of Canada. Good evening to everyone.
So, Pat, let's start the episode with the fundamental questions, such as your description talks about the time when you were very much shy or inhibited. What was your life before Toastmasters life?
Well, that's a very simple and a very complex question. So thank you for starting with that. I was a very silent person, and I was also very invisible. I was in my 30s before I met Toastmasters, and I really spoke my mind about nothing. If I was asked an opinion, I didn't have one, and I never spoke up. I was super shy, and I was so lacking in confidence and self-esteem, I didn't want to be seen. So I had a ways to go in my development.
I understand what you're saying. It's almost like feeling like a wallflower, or like Robin Williams in his movie 1 Hour Photo, uh, admiring people who are very expressive from a distance, wanting to be like them, but not knowing quite how to get there. So, like every great journey, you found the Toastmasters. Is there somebody we can give credit to for having brought you into the organization?
Well, there were a number of people. involved in keeping me here for sure, but in bringing me, I was involved in a university course, and one of my fellow students said to me after I had done just an abysmal job of presenting, he said, "You should go to Toastmasters." And I went, "What's Toastmasters?" We wouldn't have it in the small town where I live. And he said, "There's a club in your town, go, it'll help you speak." And I thought, I don't want to speak. I was uncomfortable presenting. I don't want to do that. Why would I go to improve something I don't want to do? And so I avoided it for a whole 9 months. And at the end of that 9 months, I couldn't quit losing that idea. It followed me around. So one evening, a Tuesday night at 7 o'clock, the club met. And it actually met in the church where I went as a child, in the basement. And so I thought, I know my way into the building. Let's just get into the building, see what it's about, and see if they can help me. So I went to the door of the church hall where it was being held, and I put my hand on the door and I started to pull the door open, and it was the heaviest door I had ever tried to move in my life. And as it creaked open and I stuck my head in, and I looked down the stairs where I had to go, and I was just about to slam the door shut and leave, and somebody hollered to me and said, "Welcome to Toastmasters, come on in." And I went, oh, darn, I'm caught. Now I have to go in. So I went down those stairs, and at the bottom was this friendly, welcoming face. His name was Joseph, and he said, "Come on into Toastmasters." I went in, I sat down, I never made a sound. And at the end, Joseph came up to me and he said, "We would love to have you in our club. Please join Toastmasters with us." And that was the key for me, because up until then, just sitting through that meeting, I didn't know if I was smart enough, if they liked me enough, if I could afford it, if I was going to be good enough, if I would fit in, would they let me in? All the barriers that you could imagine in my mind that I made up that would disqualify me. And by him saying, "Please join our club," was magic. It opened the door for me. And I joined, and that was 38 years ago.
Now, to our viewers, to understand Pat's dilemma, you'd have to understand that the average person, the way that Pat was when she first started, can feel enormous anxiety and stress. After all, there's a reason why the fear of public speaking is number one on everybody's list anywhere in the world. I myself have had guests that I brought to a club meeting who dreaded the president's time when they would be asked to share for just one tiny minute what they thought of the meeting. Some of them, and I'm not kidding about this, would hide in the toilet until the meeting was called to a close before they ventured to go out. And I had to invite them more than once to just pull up the courage to begin to talk. And Pat's almost miraculous effort to attend that meeting. And, clearly that was like a Vincent Price moment, those old horror movies. And I can just imagine how beautiful the story Pat gave, the door creaking. And so if we had a sound editor do that,
That's what it felt like.
yeah. And God bless him, Joseph, wherever you are. We were so glad that you smiled and brought sunshine into Pat's world and just invited her in, because of you, we have now in this episode one of the best leaders that Toastmasters has ever had. So Pat, continuing on with your story, with your journey, was it a gradual growth, or was it a sudden switch from being inhibited to becoming expressive? What was your journey like?
Well, my journey was very long, as you can imagine. I'm still here 38 years later, still learning every day that I'm involved with Toastmasters and getting feedback. But the first 3 to 5 years was very incremental and tiny steps, because I didn't go to learn how to speak. I learned how to go into a room where there were people who were going to actually look at me because of the confidence and self-esteem. So I slowly got used to this small group seeing me. And then I started practicing presentations, and Joseph again showed up, and he was one of these persistent mentors that we all should love, adore, and worship. And I would present in my small club, because we were a very small club in a very small town. But I would present, and Joseph would be my evaluator, and he would say, we need more vocal variety from you. Your voice is all on one level. And so I would go home and I would practice. And I had been taking music lessons, so I would write pianissimo in my notes, and then I would crescendo, and I would practice raising my voice and hollering, and then I would practice it whispering. And I'd go, okay, now I've got vocal variety. And I'd go back to my club and I'd schedule to speak in a couple of weeks, and I would present. And Joseph inevitably would be an evaluator, whether formally or informally. And he would come up to me and he'd say, we need some more vocal variety, Pat. And so this went on. And every time I spoke, he would come up and say, we need more vocal variety from you. So I said, Joseph, when are you going to ask me for something other than vocal variety? And he said, Pat, when you give me more vocal variety, I will ask you for something else. So he was so persistent and so caring in that process. So the first 5 years, 6 years in my club, 4 to 5 years, were very gradual. But as I gained experience and confidence, I got asked to be an area director by a division or by a district director who only knew me socially, did not know me in Toastmasters at all. But she called me and said, I need an area director out in the rural area. Will you do it? And I went, okay, Elena, just because I know you, I'll say yes. So I figured out what an area director does, because I'd never seen or heard of one before. And so I became an area director, and that's where the growth started. I had to work with 5 clubs. They were all over 2 hours drive away from me in rural areas. And so I was driving after work to attend these evening clubs, and I found that I loved it. And then the next year I went up to division director, and what happened when I was area director? I ended up being area director of the year for the district. And that was a huge boost for me in confidence. Then I went to be division, and then was really feeling like I was ready for district leadership, because now all my friends were in district team, and I was going to region conferences. I'd been to my first international conference and got an idea of the huge scope in the world that Toastmasters has. And so I thought, well, there's a place for me here. And but just when I was ready to go into district leadership, I moved across Canada to the other coast, and that set me back. And I didn't get into district leadership right away. I had some real challenges to get into district leadership in a new district where I had to start over. So it was, I had a very slow start. Then I had some confidence building. Then I started over in a new district. It took me 3 tries. I ran 3 times for election in the new district before I got elected to what's now club growth director. And then I went on through the district leadership. I went on from a district leadership with 1 year break into a running for international director, was elected to that position. And then from there was encouraged to run for executive committee and what was then 3rd vice president. I did that, and then served as international president. And I'm still involved today, always find things to do as a leader in the organization. So it took me a long time to get going, and I had some spurts and starts, but here I am, and I'm sometimes amazed. I've told many people that if I, the person who opened that heavy, heavy door and got down those steps to my first Toastmasters meeting, if I can be international president, anybody can be. Never judge the guest when they walk into your meeting.
Now, those are wonderful points to make, Pat, because some of our viewers might be under the impression that, when they meet somebody for the first time in a club setting and, they're so sanguine or so extroverted, that could literally frighten them because they'll begin to measure themselves against those individuals and say, I could never be like that.
Mhm.
So for our viewers, let me just clarify that Pat's journey did not happen overnight. As she described, 5 painstaking years, starting with things like vocal variety and moving on to bigger and greater things. Each development bringing with it more confidence, more motivation to look for the next level, to become even better. So, to our viewers who are interested in joining the Toastmasters or looking for an online club to join, let me just reassure everybody by saying that, we aren't here to pursue perfection. We're here to make progress. And that's what will happen to you when you attend, when you join. And one more thing before I turn back to Pat is that the Toastmasters is an excellent mentorship program. So, it's not like you're going to sink or swim. In her story, you remember she did talk about Joseph, who helped her, who held her hand as she grew and developed. In my own journey, I remember it was DTM, Nestor Dizon, who spotted a young 18-year-old in the Bayanihan Toastmasters Club and decided to sponsor my membership. So I didn't even have to pay for it. Now, the difference simply being that I started to attend when I was 16, mainly
Mm.
because my mother, Dinah Loomis, a district governor here in District 75, brought me with her. And previous to that, I had some uh, oratorical and declamation contests under my belt already in school. So I suppose this sort of blew Nestor away and he decided to give me a scholarship. So my journey is on a slightly different direction, but I want you to take inspiration from Pat's story because that is more mainstream. That a lot of people will go through struggles, but
Mhm.
they will be worth it, worth it. So Pat, tell us more. Earlier we heard something about the something I've never heard before, like the on ontological coaching.
Yes.
What's that?
Well, ontological coaching is a style of executive or life coaching, depending on whoever you decide to coach. And for me, it was the beautiful opportunity to meld so many things that I've learned in Toastmasters as well as in my whole life experience to a practice. Ontological coaching is about coaching the entire human being. So we don't just coach to performance or to achieve a goal, but what really matters when we look at ontological approach, which means the whole being, all of us, our heart, soul, mind, everything together, is who are we being while we're accomplishing our goals? So are we running over everybody? Are we mean? Do we leave a wake of ruin in behind us? Or are we genuine, authentic, caring, compassionate, empathic? All of those things, both to ourselves, which we're usually the hardest on, but also to the people around us. So it's
Okay.
really digging down and finding under all those fears and insecurities and the things that we've learned to hide, who are we at the core of our beingness?
So help me to understand it a little better. I love your description of it. Uh, Clearly, it's what you might call a holistic approach to
Yes.
developing person. And yet,
Yes.
for our viewers' benefit, I would love to give you a chance to define or differentiate it from, say, life coaching. Uh, how are they different?
Well, I guess I would start and define it just by telling you a couple of things that I do with my clients first off. One of the very first things that I do is I ask people what they want to achieve. So people are very goal oriented, right? We want to make more money, we want to be younger, we want to be skinnier, we want to be more beautiful, whatever it is, right? Everybody's got goals. They all want to achieve something. We can achieve that. Most people can just set their determination and push through without much concern of what happens on the inside. And so what we do in ontological coaching is explore the fears that each individual has. And we start by looking at what's in our comfort zone currently. So say the inside of this circle is what we're comfortable doing. And then we want to explore what we call the realm of possibility, which is everything that's on the outside of this comfort circle. And out there is where we want to keep expanding. So as we explore our fears and realize that they're just stories we tell ourselves. So if somebody says, I'm afraid of public speaking, they come to Toastmasters, and before we know it, 2 or 3 weeks down, we've mentored them, we've coached them, we've supported them and loved them, we've given them some knowledge, and they stand up and they do an icebreaker. And now suddenly, public speaking is inside their comfort zone. So they've expanded it. Then they say, I could never lead a team. And they get elected president of the club. They're leading a team. And they say, but I couldn't do anything outside the club. And somebody comes along and says, you could be a great area director. And they expand their comfort zone. So part of it is helping people not tear down, but open up and explore their fears and figure out ways to confront them. Find out the stories that we've built around that fear. So like I had a story about not being smart enough. And so I thought that because of things I'd heard when I was a child, I interpreted that to mean that I wasn't smart. So when I was in my 30s, I was still walking around with the belief that I couldn't have the career I wanted. I couldn't have the life I wanted because I wasn't smart enough. I didn't consciously know that, but when I started coaching, I discovered that. So when I was in my 30s, when I joined Toastmasters, I actually went and did an IQ test with Mensa. And I found out I was not stupid. I had to have hard evidence because the story was so old with me from when I was a small child. So that ontological coaching comes right up close to counseling. And we deal with those things that run people's lives, the things that hold us down, those self-beliefs that we buy into and that we're afraid to challenge, or we don't know we even have them. And so an ontological coach provides that mirror to say, so what's all this about? I hear you saying that you're not smart enough. Tell me about that. And so we deep dive into that and start to pull it apart, find out where the stories are and where the fear is based. So it's very deep work, but it's so satisfying because you can't unring the bell. Once you know that, you know it. And then you can resolve it because we choose every day, every moment, how to live our lives. And so we learn to make different choices.
Very fascinating explanation, and I love the way that it to me sounded like you borrow elements from psychology or
Yeah,
psychoanalysis, and
yeah,
maybe some elements from NLP, which is your neuro-linguistic programming,
yes.
to help the individual overcome their fears. And since you talked about managing a person's comfort zone, or sometimes it's referred to as the safe zone, where they
Mhm.
feel safe enough to explore their potentials. Tell me, It's probably not that easy, and you had to undergo certification for this. What was the toughest part of becoming an ontological coach for you?
Well, when I quit the corporate world and I thought I was going to relax and enjoy life, and I thought, oh, I am way too young to not do something with my brain now that I knew I had one. And so I went back to school and I took a whole year's training. I spent a lot of money on it. And the hardest part for me was actually to believe and trust my intuition, because training or coaching people at an ontological level is very intuitive. People don't come right out and say, oh, I'm afraid of this, or my mother's voice is in my ears telling me I can't do that. People don't often have that awareness. And so it's going very intuitively, going, what's going on here? And the other part of coaching ontologically for me was to actually do my own work, that I could not coach somebody to have a fabulous relationship if I had a whole bunch of barriers around it and I couldn't have a fabulous relationship, or if I didn't have often even sometimes the clients would bring issues like they were having difficulty within their family and maybe a brother sister relationship or something like that. Then it drew me to look at my brother sister relationships and say, how are my relationships? And so that was the part that I loved, because I always had to be learning with my clients because of the issues that they would come forward with, that it gave me an opportunity to self-examine and to do the kind of work that they also would do. So it's an ongoing learning journey that I love.
It sounds to me like you also had to sharpen your emotional quotient and certainly your empathic skills. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes we could see that uh, people with their own struggles ultimately make better coaches because they understand and they can fully empathize with somebody who's struggling because they've had similar or related struggles in their
Mm-hmm.
lives.
Mm-hmm.
What was I'm just curious because I feel like maybe you've been doing this for quite a while already without breaking any confidentiality rules. What to you was the case or the moment where you helped somebody blossom and you think of that and up to now it fills you with joy. Could you describe to us
Yeah.
your favorite ontological coaching moment?
Yeah, well, I'm going to do it from a very selfish perspective, and I'm going to share a situation for me that was the epitome of ontological coaching and the love and the strength that happens both at the same times in a relationship. And I'm going to share a time that my coach was coaching me. And I've always had a great value around valuing my relationships and being my word. And if I said I was going to be someplace at a certain time, I would pay the price, whatever the price was, to be there at that time. And I would never ask to renegotiate. I would just be there. It didn't matter what it was going to cost me. Well, we had a circumstance that arose, and in the program that I was taking, you could only miss a certain number of hours. I had been away on a trip with Toastmasters actually, and had missed all but a half hour of what I could miss in the class without failing the class. Now, this was one whole year of school, and I had only 1/2 hour that I was allowed to miss. It cost me tens of thousands of dollars for this program. And I was now within graduating limits. The situation came up that I had been asked to present at an event in town for nothing. I was presenting from Toastmasters International, and it was going to overlap my session that I had to be at for coaching by 1 hour, meaning that I was now going to be debit. I was going to be minus 1/2 hour of graduating. And I could not make the decision that I would phone the person and ask to renegotiate the time. That I found that I was in that point where I was willing to give up tens of thousands of dollars, 1 year of education, to do a non-paying Toastmaster presentation that was going to take me 1/2 hour over. And my coach helped me see that. She spent 2 hours helping me see that that didn't make sense. And at the end of that, I actually phoned the person in tears because I was this was impossible to do. This was against my values. My reputation was everything. This would ruin me. I mean, it was irrational because it was fear. I phoned the person and said, is it possible that we could renegotiate the time that I speak on your agenda? That person, without taking a breath or a pause, said, absolutely, what would work for you? And that so astounded me that I said, can I get back to you in a short while? And so I hung up from them. I told my coach what they had said, and she said, that's how life works. People accommodate other people all the time. And yet you pay the ultimate price without anybody ever knowing that you're doing it. Because what is that? Is that worthiness? Do you not think that you're respected enough that somebody would change? Is that asking too much? Do you always not ask for what you actually need? It wasn't even what I wanted. It was what I needed. And so ultimately, we negotiated the time being changed. The person actually had a taxi waiting for me. They offered to have a taxi cab waiting for me when I was finished speaking that would take me to my class in time. I got to my class early. I didn't miss the 1/2 hour. I eventually graduated without penalties. So it was a huge lift for me. It changed my life, and it changed my relationship with people. It changed my relationship with myself, and it changed my relationship with the world and how I felt that people treated one another. I really discovered that people want to support other people. And I always felt like that was my job, to support everyone else, and that they didn't have to support me. I would tough it through. And I discovered in that moment that I didn't have to tough it through, that I could be soft, I could be gentle, I could be fun, I could be playful, and people would say, yes, I'll accommodate you if I would just be brave enough to ask for what I needed. So it was a phenomenal experience for me.
Thank you so much, Pat. For our viewers, you will notice that through all 4 seasons of The Leader's Edge, that a common thread that manifests itself among successful individuals such as Pat is their value for integrity and how much they're willing to sacrifice to protect that. Now, thanks to Pat's testimony, you will also hopefully come to realize that there is a fine line between keeping your word and keeping your sanity. uh, because when the cost is too much, then it's fair to inform the other person what you're giving up for them, and then let them make a decision as to the resolution of a particular issue. And in this case, um, God clearly rewarded Pat by allowing her client to understand the dilemma that she was in and renegotiate. So that's one powerful lesson that Pat shared with us, to not be afraid to speak the truth, to renegotiate when things are unreasonably high in terms of personal cost because uh, while it is important to serve our customers, our clients, and maintain that integrity, we also need to make sure that they understand what it's costing us to do that. So, Pat, I'd like to continue the discussion by asking, when did you decide? Because you said when you finished your time in the corporate world, and then you decided, "Uh, life is still so new for me. Um, I need to try and do something else." Now, very quickly before I turn over to Pat, uh, for many Toastmasters, sometimes they think when they become a DTM or when they become a club president that that's pretty much their career. And that's not true at all because individuals such as Pat, who came from humble beginnings, can really blossom and from being a caterpillar turn into a beautiful butterfly and actualize. So,
Yeah.
when did that aha moment occur to you when you realized, hey, I'm still young and life has just begun for me? And what
Yeah.
made you decide to go in the direction that you did?
Yes. Well, I think I had great success once I got the confidence and the self-esteem in my career, and I was successful in Toastmasters. My career in learning and development, I was in the world of adult education and running learning and development departments when in both corporations and government organizations or branches. And what happened for me was that they really paralleled one another. So as I went up in Toastmasters, all those transferable skills went with me in my career. And so I had a very successful career. And there just came a day when I'd really reached the epitome of what I thought I wanted to accomplish. We had finished our fifth year of a 5-year strategic plan in the corporate world. And my department was really strong. I had great staff. I had a couple of people that were ready to be promoted. And I looked around and went, what do I want to do next? Because I always want to be learning. And I thought, it's time for me to step away and do something else. I didn't know at that time what it was going to be, but I did resign shortly after that because I felt very led to it. I really rely on a spiritual leading. I feel pulled to do certain things. So I felt pulled to leave the corporate world. I didn't feel pulled to anything in particular, but I felt pulled to step away from that to allow other opportunities to come to me. So I went, and 2 days after I left that environment, I got on a plane and I flew to England, and I went to a spiritual school, and I studied there for a while to just really get in touch and open my heart and my soul to who I was and what I really felt my gifts were. And that was a great time of recouping after a real intense corporate experience and job, etc., very demanding, as well as the leadership roles I had in Toastmasters at the same time. So I stepped away. And one day after I got home from that, I was walking down the street and I was watching all the people because I love people watching. And I saw people walking by me. And I thought, this hasn't happened to me for years, because when I was in the corporate world, I was in a building, I was with people that I was working with, people were coming to me for advice and knowledge, and my team I was working with, we were creating amazing things. And I thought, if I stay in this world, because I have one son and one daughter-in-law who live on the other side of Canada, and at that time I was single, I thought, if I stay in this place in my life, I will be invisible. I will be one of those invisible people on the street again. I will be back to where I was when I was in my 30s. I'll be invisible again. And so I thought, because I really had an interest in politics and the political process, I looked at a number of things there. And I kept going back to learning and what was really important to me. I went back to my values and what I've always felt passionate about. And it was always the potential in people. So I started looking, and I felt very drawn to the programming accomplishment coaching. And when I checked it out, it turned out that one of my very good friends was a friend and a colleague with the owner of the company. So I went, this is so serendipitous. And so that was the final decision for me. And so I signed up to not be invisible, to be a voice of people that maybe finished doing their formal corporate world, but having another career, because keeping active and keeping involved and keeping engaged and contributing. And I think that we get old when we stop learning, when we stop learning and giving and experiencing. And I have no intention of doing that.
Pat, I fully agree with that because Einstein did say, "He who stops learning stops growing." And if you
Yeah.
stop growing, then you're pretty much dead. And
Yeah.
for our listeners, our viewers, this is another common thread with everyone who's been in the show. People like Musharraf Hossein, Dilip, and Cheryl Rausch, uh, that they discovered that when you become a great communicator, leadership roles tend to gravitate towards you. You become almost like the sun, where the planets begin to orbit around you. And it won't be very difficult for you to find opportunities for growth. And here's the great side effect of being active in the Toastmasters and volunteering to be a leader. It's not all about speech contests, please.
No.
There
No.
are other ways to grow, and that is by becoming a leader.
Yeah.
So I'd now like to ask Pat, could you describe to us your firm, your consulting firm? Um, this situation now where we're doing online classes, maybe even asynchronous training, has, I'm sure, created a lot of stress with many of our colleagues who weren't necessarily techie at the start, but have had to learn a lot of new skills. What was it? What was it like for you when you made the pivot towards online education, or were you already doing that before this?
Yes. Well, I worked in a large organization where we had people all over the place, and I had a group of seminar leaders that I trained and worked with, and they had done online seminars that I'd actually trained them to do. So I was very familiar with online work. And my coaching was mostly online as well, some on telephone, but mostly on Zoom. And so this was a very known medium for me. So when we switched a year ago, in Toastmasters, it was like, oh, I'm set up, I'm ready to go. This is great. And I'm actually teaching a course at the University of Victoria here in British Columbia on presenting online for the, what do they call it? The heads, the department heads and their administrative people, etc. So our transferable skills from Toastmasters take us in many interesting places. So yeah, opportunities always find us. I actually promised myself just at the beginning of this week that I was going to start and say no to a few things, because every day was getting so busy, and we're starting to, the weather here, it's time to be out in the garden, and we love to be outside and go for walks and do things outside. And I'm going, oh, I don't want to be inside all day long. I'm going to start and cut back. I've done the winter online all day long every day, and let's cut it back a bit. But I've also just recently been notified that I'll be the region advisor for Region 2 now.
I'd now like to talk about another part of our show, which is about influencing. What could you say about how we as communicators can influence others? Or is there a fine art to becoming good at influencing?
Well, I'm not sure it's a fine art, but thank you, Dino. I think it is a persistent art. I think if we're going to influence people, first of all, we have to really understand what we want to influence about and be really informed so that we understand all the implications from all angles, because something is, it's very, everything has multiple factors to it. So being well informed and really thoughtful, and then being persistent, because I think back to when I first started getting involved with putting Toastmasters in corporations and experimenting with it and finding what worked, because I knew what didn't work. And so trying new things. And when I worked for probably almost 20 years doing it that way before I actually sat down, wrote the book, published it, and then presented it at the World Convention in Chicago in 2018. So that was a culmination of years of believing and knowing and doing something different that worked. But then to have the conviction, and in that process, talking to world headquarters, being transparent about what I was doing, making sure that I understood their approach and their understanding, but they also understood what I was doing and that the possible implications of it. So I think resilience, persistence is so important when we're going to influence, as well as really understanding the circumstance.
Pat, everything you've said is true, because imagine from your simple beginnings where you were so afraid to even twist that knob and enter that place, and now influencing others, being persistent. For our viewers, you need to understand that it's still an anxiety driven driving moment when you start to talk to CEOs, to presidents, to HR leaders and managers, and attempt to influence them to provide a support system for whatever you're trying to do for them. And it's not enough that you coach somebody, that you train somebody, but that you have to provide backup to sustain their
Yeah.
growth and development. And that takes influencing. So this skill that Pat is talking about that can be learned. It's not necessarily an
Yeah.
art, but it could be a science. Oh, no, it is. It is science. There's a system for it. Is important, and that even though you are a seasoned Toastmaster, if you're new to becoming a consultant and a trainer, you will re-experience some of those fears, and
Mhm.
you will have that moment where you find yourself on a new horizon, and
Yeah.
growth is once again possible. So, Pat, if people want to reach you and say engage your services, because clearly you've helped so many others, how do they get in touch with you? Could you share with us your contact details?
Sure. Just my email is the best way, because I have nowadays we have so much multimedia going on that I'm most predictable to contact me by my email. And that is Pat the Trainer. So that's PATTHETRAINER at Shaw, SHAW.ca. So Pat the Trainer at shaw.ca. And I am in my email probably 18 hours a day, so that's the way to find me. If you really have difficulty finding me, look for me on Facebook. I'm Pat Johnson on Facebook. So, and that's where some people find me as a default. Yeah.
So thanks a lot for sharing those details. Begin to correspond with her and get in touch. Uh,
Yeah.
what advice would you give those who are probably thinking, my career in Toastmaster has pretty much topped out. I've been president, area director, uh, and maybe they're now contemplating, should I pursue district directorship, division directorship? Um, what message would you have for people who are still, deciding between, oh, I love competing so much, but I'm not so sure I want to lead others.
Well, I would say that leading is the greatest challenge. I have competed in some speech contests, not very successfully. I was successful in an evaluation contest, but to the district level, but not into the international level of speaking. However, you have to be a really good speaker, in my opinion, to lead well, to be a good leader, because you're inspiring every day that you meet your team, you're inspiring. So you give inspirational speeches every day that you're meeting with your teams. I would say step up, do the thing that scares you to do it. There's where your greatest growth will lie. And remember that in Toastmasters, we don't know how to do these things. We don't know how to do these roles when we hold up our hand and say, I'd like to be the area director of my area next year. We don't know how to do them. Toastmasters will teach us, and that's where the growth comes. That's where the metamorphosis happens, when we step out of our comfort zone into that possibility place. We become the area director and we grow in awareness, skills, confidence, self-esteem. And remember that when somebody comes up to you and says, I see something in you, as Dhananjaya would say, believe them. Ask them what they see. Listen to them, trust them. And if they say, I believe that you could be a division director, look at them and see if they were actually a division director. Do they really know what a division director needs, right?
Right.
If they have been a successful one, then believe them. If somebody who's been an international president comes along and said, I someday see you being an international president, if you want to do that, believe them. We don't say it lightly to people. I tap people on the shoulder all the time for area and division director roles because I see potential in people when we're at the club level. That's where the stars are. The stars come out in our clubs, right? We see them when we go looking for them. So when I say, are you interested in being an area director or a division director? I'll support you. That's sincere, and that's a compliment, and that's an encouragement for that person to step out of their comfort zone to go to the next level of leadership. That's what someone did for me. That someone took my hand as my mentor and helped me side by side all through those steps, because I didn't know how to be an international director, but I learned. I didn't know how to be a third, second, senior vice president. I didn't know how to be a president, but I learned. People don't abandon us in Toastmasters. They encourage us to step forward, and then they're there to support us. You know, you mentioned Dilip. Dilip Ebisekra, my fellow Sri Lankan. He's my Sri Lankan brother. I met Dilip's mother and loved her dearly. But Dilip was one of the people that came to me when I was still an international director and said, are you interested in going on? When people like that say it, listen to them, because they're telling you something. And I listened to the people that told me, and they were all there to support me and encourage me in the journey of learning. And now I get to return that to many other people as well. So I just encourage people, always challenge your comfort zones. If you're comfortable in your club, go into a more challenging club. Go where you're uncomfortable. If you're comfortable in your job, find a more challenging job. If you are comfortable in your leadership role, go find a greater leadership role, because we're all looking for leaders in this world. And as you said, your previous guests have indicated that when you're a leader, opportunities find you. There's always somebody's got your phone number on speed dial, and they're going to find you, which is great. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you for asking me that question.
You're very welcome, Pat. And for our listeners, our viewers, especially those who are fellow Toastmasters, please listen to what Pat is saying. Now more than ever, people need influencers. People need leaders to
Yeah.
convince people, say, to protect themselves. To wear their mask, to wear their shields, or to get vaccinated. There are a lot of practical applications for the leadership skills that you now have. So take inspiration from Pat's story. Remember that not every great speaker started out as a great speaker. Some of them have had to take a slower, uh, more developmental journey to get where they're at. So, Pat, if there's somebody you'd like to thank or to encourage out there, could we have some final words from you?
Oh, well, there's many people I want to thank, and those that I want to thank are those people that have been with me along the leadership journey, both as my mentors and my friends. I also want to acknowledge all the past presidents of Toastmasters International and how we support one another and continue to love and honor this organization and love and honor the leaders that are being developed in it currently. If people are afraid, I just encourage you to step out from behind that fear, to discover the real, beautiful, authentic you under all that fear. Because I believe that we were born without fear, and somebody put that fear on top of us, and we've been carrying it around. And as adults, we get to choose what we do with it. So I challenge you to choose freedom, to choose authenticity, to do the journey that takes you to your true self, where you and only you can shine through and be real. As Groucho Marx said, just be yourself. Everyone else is taken. And we are perfect in our imperfections. So I just encourage everybody to embrace themselves in their imperfections and knowing that that's just perfect.
Thank you so much, Pat. And for our viewers, do stand by because our next episode called Cat's Leadership Her. Because our speaker, our guest for our next episode is none other than Christine Temblique. That's CAT for short. So that's why it's Cat's Leadership Her. And she will be interviewed by one of our other hosts. That's Michelangelo Chua or Mike Chua. So, ladies and gentlemen, as ever, our tagline for this show, which we feel is true then and it is now, is that learning is a never-ending journey with limitless vistas. So thank you so much, Pat, and thank you
You're
to
so
our
welcome.
viewers. May you have a great week ahead of you. Good evening.